everyone, and welcome to another fabulous edition of our Portainer Community Chats, where we highlight the fabulous members of our community around the world using Portainer often in ways that even we couldn't expect. Tonight's show is very exciting because we have a special guest joining us from Germany. And just real quick, a welcome, no matter your time zone, whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening. I am currently here on Hawaii Standard Time where it's 10 p.m. So cheers to those of you in the PM hours. But we welcome our guests from Europe in particular, where we targeted this show to feature. We are super thrilled to be presenting Tobias tonight, who is with us from COSMO CONSULT. He's going to tell you how he's using Portainer CE in a business fashion in a very unique way, and how he believes it's going to adapt with him, and also answer a lot of really candid questions. As I mentioned that, please, by all means, share questions with us in the chat. If you're feeling bold and you want to come on camera, we're willing to pull you up, and you just might get a little Portainer swag as a result of that. Before we introduce our very fabulous guest this evening, I'd just like to let you know that I also have Diane, who runs our community, on the phone with us, as well as your favorite CEO, Neil Creswell. Thank you again for, for joining us. Tobias, my gosh, what a joy it has been preparing for tonight, and I don't say that lightly. Thank you so much for joining us. Let the audience know where you're at, who you work for. Feel free to give us a shameless plug. We can't wait to hear all the things you have to say. What's going on, Tobias? How you doing tonight?
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for having me. Really appreciate the chance and being part of the Portainer community. That's what I probably want to say first. The Portainer community, for all those out there who haven't been part of it, it's absolutely worth joining, taking part of that, looking at what the community has to offer. I mean, I'm working with quite a couple of open source things, but really the Portainer community is special. I'm not saying that because I'm an ambassador. That really is a great pleasure. But even before becoming that, it was always very open. Whoever you're asking, you're getting friendly answers, you're getting help, you're getting feedback. Even Neil is jumping in, giving answers. So really, if you're not part of the community, if you're joining for the first time, take the small little effort to join there, get on Slack or whatever works for you. And I really think you will find out that it's a very open and appreciative community. Having said that, maybe I should have actually introduced myself first. So Tobias is the name, as you already said. I'm the CTO for COSMO CONSULT. We're actually a more or less global community, a company. We're focused or started in Europe. Now we have companies across the world, in Asia, in Southern America, partners in Northern America and Australia. But yeah, still the focus is Europe. To give you an idea of what we're doing, we're working mainly on the Microsoft stack, so the business applications, Dynamics 365, but also the technology stuff like Azure. And the size of the company is around 1,200 people, rapidly growing. So we have multiple companies in all the countries that we're working for, and I don't know, definitely a couple of thousand customers that we're working with. And I personally, as I said, I'm the CTO, so I'm responsible for all the technology stuff. Actually, the company and the scope of what we're doing is way too big for me to have an idea of everything that we're doing. So I of course, also specialize in a couple of the aspects. And when it comes to Portainer, we have a self-service offering that's around one of the business areas that we're working in, where we're heavily using Portainer in a business context. So we're using the CE version, but in a business context. And that's probably the introduction, the parts that I can share to begin with.
Tobias, I can't think of a better introduction. And I'm actually curious, this isn't even on our queue, and I promise we didn't pay Tobias to say that you should be a community ambassador or that our community is special. That was just an added bonus and brings joy to the heart of everyone on this call, quite frankly. But I'm very curious, just to warm us up, how did you find the Portainer community? How are you here with us, and how are we so lucky?
Yeah, I mean, I think it must have been like 2016, 2017. where I first got in touch with Docker around containers. And then very soon after that, I found out that the Windows side also has something cooking. That was on a conference. I still remember hearing it for the first time. It was kind of a surprise for me because I only had seen it in the Linux world, and it was interesting, but we were mostly focused on Windows. So it was like, will we ever get this? It sounds interesting, but is it relevant for me? And then I was at a conference and actually listening to someone who showed this, and I just decided to skip the next 2 sessions because I wanted to give it a try. I fortunately had my laptop with me, so I just went out and gave it a try. And then probably a couple of days or weeks after, I really found out about Portainer and was immediately blown away, because it's just, you know, coming in and seeing something that works so well, that has so many features, and you just run it and it works, and it gives you all the things that you were hoping for. So that really, from the first time, I immediately saw that this is something that I want to have in my tool stack, or in the tool stack of the company that I've been working at the time. And since then, I've been following closely, trying to share with people how they can use it, but also, of course, using it myself and using it in our business context. So that's where we got in touch, and seeing the growth, seeing the switch to 2.0 now, seeing the split in the community edition and the business edition, but also still a lot of the love that the community edition still gets. So that's great to see all that.
Again, I just want to remind everyone we didn't pay Tobias to say that. That was a really beautiful introduction, and I'm sure I speak for everyone here on the Portainer team. It is music to our ears to hear that you were so excited that you immediately wanted to try and implement and start exploring, and felt that it really fit. Thank you for that. So give us a little more context on your stack. What are you doing? What other tech are you using? How exactly is Portainer fitting in so lovely and fabulously, in your words?
So what we're doing is, as I said, mainly on the Microsoft side. So we're using Dynamics 365, mostly Business Central, one of the ERP offerings by Microsoft. And that means that we're completely focused on Windows. So that's just a matter of fact. I personally struggled a bit with that when I moved over to the company, because it was coming from a Linux background. But yeah, I've made my peace with the Microsoft stack. Let's put it that way. So we're using it on the Windows side. We have Docker Swarm as an orchestrator. That's probably the other unusual thing that we're doing. When we started doing all of this, it was still, let's say, Kubernetes was already there, but it wasn't as clear as it now seems that the market is heavily leaning toward Kubernetes. So we started with Swarm at the point. And we still have a couple of dependencies that only Swarm is able to do. We absolutely like the ease of use. It's a lot less complex. It's easier to implement for us. So that makes a lot of sense in that area. So that's the reason why we're still on Swarm. A couple of dependencies that would require work to move away from. And we're very happy where we are now. So yeah, it's Windows, it's Docker Swarm. And what we're using it mainly for is actually the self-service part for a user. So to give you some perspective, our typical user would be someone who doesn't have a lot of knowledge about containerization, maybe even no knowledge at all. They are either consultants or developers coming from the business application side. So a lot of functional knowledge, a lot of specific technical knowledge, but really not a lot of container knowledge. And my idea from the beginning was that we have that knowledge. We're very good at it. I'm fortunate enough to work with a couple of colleagues who are really, really good at doing that kind of thing. So we kind of implement everything that we need. We have deployment infrastructure. We have built up a couple of services and APIs that help us to spin up the containers or the services in a Swarm. And we have automated all that, but then our users come in, they're using either a Power App, which is a Microsoft technology as well, or they are using a Visual Studio Code extension to spin up their containers. But then they need access to the log files, they need access to the PowerShell inside of the container and that kind of thing. And that means that we need to have an easy way for them to access that. I don't want to bother them with any scripts or access to remote login server, whatever. They just need to have a web application where they can easily open up the interface, log in. That one is done through an Azure AD integration for us, so they don't have to remember additional passwords or something like that. And then they can easily just click on a link to get the log file, click on a link to get a PowerShell, and start working there, whatever they need to do. So that's really the beauty for Portainer for us, that it allows us to hide a lot of the complexity. We're building that up, we're creating that with a relatively small team, and then we have a lot of people who are just using it and need a front end that is easy to use, and their Portainer absolutely is the perfect fit for us.
Tobias, what version of Windows are you running this on? Is this the latest version with all of the latest patches and everything else?
Yeah, we're using Windows Server 2019. We've been using the 1809 version, so that was around 2018 September, whatever it came out, and we used it for quite a long time. But after using for a while, we ran into some weird issues there. So we moved now to 2004, which is not the latest, but the previous one. And we're very happy with that so far. It seems very stable. We didn't have a lot of issues, or actually we have had no issues at all so far. In the Windows world, especially in the Swarm Windows world, you here and there run into issues, and then it can be a bit of a struggle to find people who are willing to help, because it's not a ton of people who are using it. But so far, we've really had a very stable and solid experience with 2004.
Yeah, I'd say you're definitely in the minority in regards to using Docker on Windows, but yeah, the fact that it's been stable is good.
Well, I think that's actually really interesting, because not only is this what you're doing, you recently created a 3-part series on creating a Windows Docker Swarm on Azure using Terraform series. Perfect parlay. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, it's kind of the way that we've been doing things, and I mean, sitting in my position and trying to find information, and wherever you go to, you can see, okay, this is now the Linux explanation, and then there's maybe some paragraph that says it doesn't work exactly the same on Windows, but you'll figure it out, or something like that, which is perfectly fine because most people are using it in a different context. But that's why I'm trying to put out as much information as I can, trying to help people who are moving in the same direction to see that they are not basically the only one, and also to build up kind of a community, because as soon as you start digging, you will find out that there are actually more people who are using it. Maybe not as many people that are sharing about it, but from the amount of questions that I'm getting, or the type of questions that I'm getting, I'm seeing that a lot of people are actually using it. So I'm just trying to provide the information, getting people to see that how it works, how easy it is, and that you can actually do it, and it works rather well.
We love hearing that. I just want to give our audience members, since everyone's settling in now, a friendly reminder that we very much welcome your questions in the chat and your boldness should you choose to actually step up and converse with us in person. We understand, depending on your time zone or your location, you might prefer to send us text messages through the chat here, but we are literally here for your engagement. So do not be bashful. And even if you're not sure what your question is, let us know where you're joining us from. Let us know what you're using. Let us know where you're off at in your container management. And if you're familiar with Portainer, we're all ears, and nothing makes us happier. So how did you end up picking this particular stack? How did you learn to start using Docker Swarm, Portainer, everything that you're using now?
Yeah, when the base technology is more or less fixed, because we have to, based on our tech stack for where we are good at, where we are the experts. So the Windows side is basically fixed. And then we started to look at orchestration, and yeah, at that point it was kind of an open debate. That debate seems more or less finished by now, but it was an open debate at that point of time, and we saw how easy Swarm was to use, how easy it was to set up. Kubernetes had maybe alpha support for Windows, or maybe not even that yet. So we started to move into the Swarm world. It was interesting to get started on that one. The early version still also had some issues. By now, I think it really is rock solid for us. We didn't have any issues on that side so far in the last couple of months. But that was basically getting started there. We saw the need for an orchestration engine. We saw the need to do something that scales. We looked at the offerings, and Swarm was kind of the obvious one for us. We looked into and are still looking into Kubernetes, of course. But as I said, it's the more difficult choice for us at the moment. So we're staying on the Swarm side and trying to make everything work as we need it. We do see that with the innovation speed in Kubernetes, there are things that are happening there that would help us a lot, that we need to build now ourselves in Swarm. But at the same time, having Portainer as the front end and taking away some of the pains for us, that also helps to stay on that side.
Have you run into any major issues, or it's been relatively plain sailing for you?
We had a big issue like probably half a year ago, so something like that, where one of the Windows updates broke the incoming networking. That was a bit of a problem. But fortunately we found out relatively early and just blocked the update, so that helped us there. But apart from that, as I said, on 1809 we had some weird crashes where the Docker engine just stopped and restarted, but that of course leads to problems. So, but since we moved to 2004, no issues at all, I would say.
Mm. And was Portainer the only choice you looked at when you were looking for management platforms, or did you look at other options as well?
No, we also looked at, I think it's called Swarm Pit, something like that, also a Swarm front end. But we already, I mean, we were sure that we wanted to use Swarm, but we also recognized that it might make sense to not fully focus on it. So we saw that Portainer from the beginning seemed a lot more open toward other things and not as focused on a specific tech stack. So that was good for us. And just the functionality itself was better. So we basically looked at the options at the time when we started, like Portainer the most. And to be completely honest, since then, I haven't been looking too far into other options so far.
Good to hear. I would have been shocked otherwise.
I was going to say, Neil, I don't think you're complaining about this part.
No, not at all.
I feel as if we're all pleased to hear that. Actually, on that note, since I suspect many of our attendees and anyone who may be watching this recording is hopefully a Portainer user, or at least thinking about using Portainer, do you have any tips or tricks that you've discovered by using Portainer that you'd like to share?
I mean, that's very, very specific now, but something that I learned very recently is that the whole write management, even in the CE version, that's not as advanced as the business edition, but that one is actually a lot easier than I thought. You can just easily set a label on whatever resource you're creating, and the Portainer management will pick that up and give the right people access to, as you're suggesting. So that really is something that is a lot easier than we thought. We built something very complicated to do that, and then found out that it's very easy. So that certainly helps a lot.
And you're using the OAuth authentication for your users, right? So yeah, how's that been for you? Because obviously that's a complex setup. That's been okay as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it took us a while to figure it out. So the setup in the business edition, again, that one is easier. In the community edition, you need to take a bit more time to understand how it actually works. But since we figured it out, we basically have a nice flow now. That's not something that I'm managing. We have a global IT team that is handling the Azure AD management and the application registrations and all that kind of thing. So basically, when we spin up a new environment, I'll just ask them for the right app registration. They provide it to me. They now know exactly the information that I need. We set it up, and then it's done. So that really is very quick and easy by now. And we, on that side as well, we didn't have any issues at all. That just works.
Cool.
I'm sure Neil's crushed to hear that as well. We love hearing that it just works. That's very much music to our ears. Building on that, because we're having a good moment, do you have a favorite Portainer feature? I mean, from a management perspective, we're actually not using that much. But from an end user perspective, I mean, not sure if that qualifies as feature, but again, for me, it's ease of use. I mean, when we onboard people, we have a documentation, we have short videos, we have step-by-step guides to help people get started. And we have kind of nothing for Portainer because they
everyone just logs in and understands, okay, this is the icon for the log. I click on it and surprise, the log opens. This is the icon for the terminal. I click on it, I press OK, and I have a terminal. So my favorite feature would be it's very easy to use because we don't need to worry at all about it.
Very good.
That's exactly what we love to hear. I just want to point out and say a really big welcome to our global community tonight. We've got folks from Pushdeep. Thank you so much for joining us. You're a very loyal community member from Mumbai. We've also got Kalyan, and forgive me if I butcher your name. I'm the first person to make fun of myself if I goof up in any capacity, and definitely feel free to correct me in the comments, but from India as well. And he's excited because he didn't know that Portainer supports Windows Container. Thanks to Tobias, he's eager to give it a try. So thank you for being a gateway for us on that, Tobias. I heard you mention a little bit about where you are now and where you're eyeing in the future and going from Docker Swarm to Kubernetes. Do you feel that you'll be able to use the same toolkit that you're using now with Portainer if you make that adaptation?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a big part of our whole story. And we're very happy that we can more or less just reuse it. I mean, the interface is slightly different if you're using it on a Kubernetes backend, of course, because the structure is different, but still the things that we surface to most of our users will be more or less the same if we make the switch. So we have a lot of work to do on our backend side because, as I said, we have some dependency on Swarm. We have created our own API for creating the services and managing the services. And that one will, of course, have to change if we move to Kubernetes. But we're very happy that we can just keep Portainer as it is. We probably need to make a few slight changes here and there, providing the links and that kind of thing. But other than that, we should just be able to stay on Portainer as it is, and our users wouldn't even notice. So if we ever make the change, then I think we can hide almost all of the complexity and of the change. And a big part of that is that Portainer will just stay the same.
Mm-hmm.
Music to our ears again. Our whole goal is to hide the complexity and make everything more usable. So have you played around with Portainer for Kubernetes at all? That was a community question that we got in out the door. I know it's something you're prospecting, but.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we took a look, gave it a try, found out that it works. Basically what I did, to be honest, I followed one of the tutorials, just deployed it, tried it out. It seemed to work and I closed it again, just trusting that it will continue to work. So we really didn't look deeply into it because of the other dependencies that we have. But so far, it really looks very good.
Love it. It seems that Kalyan is on the same page as you and mentions that the one-click access to terminal of Docker container makes Portainer his favorite tool too. Yay, we're all on the same page. We are actually burning through these questions because Tobias is so incredibly articulate and well-spoken about Portainer, quite frankly. So I really want to emphasize to our attendees right now, this is your chance. This is your chance to throw in a question in the comments, to raise your hand, and the wonderful Diane will bring you on stage with us if you're feeling particularly bold. But we would love to hear your questions, and it can be nitty-gritty. It can be for Tobias or for Neil. I just want to make sure that we're certainly addressing everyone that's here, and we're so excited to have you all here. This is such a global community at this particular hour of the day. So another community question for you, Tobias. It's great that Portainer CE has met your needs so far. Have you evaluated our business offering? Perhaps discuss any things that you're currently weighing as you factor in that decision.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are, at least from my point of view, there are three reasons why we're looking at it. The first one is the Azure AD integration. That is just a lot easier. As I said, we figured it out how it works in the community edition, but that would be a point that I definitely would look at if I didn't have that in place. The other one is the RBAC support. So at the moment we have either administrators or we have users, and that is something that the business, the community edition perfectly works with. So basically I either have access or I don't have access. I either am an administrator or I am a user, but I would probably see something in our future where we need more control over that to have more fine-grained different kind of access levels. And then we will certainly also look into the business edition. And the last thing, and that is probably the moment where we definitely will make the switch, is that we so far are offering our solution internally. The self-service where we have incorporated Portainer. So to give you an idea, as I said, COSMO is a rather large company. We have different companies in the different countries. We have a couple of countries where we have multiple companies, and we are offering our service to them. So they're more or less internal customers, so to speak. But now we are moving into the external market as well. We have the first 3 customers who want to onboard that are not part of the COSMO enterprise. They're completely different companies. And then the interesting question is, can we meet the SLAs? So far, we are extremely happy with Portainer. It hasn't crashed on us. It didn't give us any problems. I think in all the years I've been using it, I saw once or twice that the database got corrupted, and you remove it, start again, and everything works again. So really, I don't have any worries at all, but it might come to a point where we onboard an enterprise and they are asking us for defined SLAs for all the components that we're using. So that might be the moment where we also need to make sure that we have a officially supported with an SLA version of Portainer. And then of course we will look into the business edition. So that also might be, or I think will be, the point where we get started on that one.
Tobias, you'll actually quite like our next version coming out soon. We've got a backup and restore function for the Portainer database. So you can either, in the free edition, you can click backup and restore manually. In the business edition, it's a fully automated process. It just backs up to an S3 object store, and you can recover if the database is ever corrupted or you need to move your instance around. So you'll like that. And also with the RBAC, we are adding custom RBAC roles. So there's a new operator role coming out in a couple of weeks, which is a role where you can engage with existing environments but not create new. And also, I think 2 months later, we're having custom roles where you can just go and define any kind of combination of roles within Portainer as well. So that might actually push you over the edge to become a business customer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the backup, to be completely honest, you really are running a lot of, or I've been running a lot of Portainer instances. Now we've been running a lot of Portainer instances, and it happens so rarely. I'm not even sure if I want to take the effort to back it up and restore it. But it's good to have it, certainly, as soon as we move into more business critical environments, then it will certainly make sense. And the airbag stuff sounds interesting, because we're seeing demand for that as well. Not too much at the moment, but I think moving forward, onboarding larger enterprises, that will certainly be a point.
So just so the audience knows, because I think this is really interesting and I'm actually curious, how many people on your team are currently using Portainer and you're watching them use it so fluidly? What's the adoption like?
Yeah, I mean, we have, I would say, like 600 or 700 of our people are in our target group. So those would be the developers and consultants working with the tech stack where we're using Portainer. I would guess that probably by now half of them have opened Portainer. So probably something between 300, 350 are using Portainer right now. And I think the adoption rate will grow, because the tech stack is evolving. We have older customers who are still using older versions where the whole containerization story doesn't work yet. But as people are moving into newer customer situations, newer projects, it kind of becomes mandatory. It doesn't make sense to use it without. And then I think we will sooner or later see all of our around 600-700 people who are using that technology open Portainer at some point in time.
Very cool. Are you using the Teams feature, or are you just using the pure users capability?
No, just the users directly.
No, you should use Teams to help simplify operations. Obviously, you can put users in Teams and gives you more fine-grained control. But
yeah, I mean, we have one default team for the OAuth to make sure that everyone can log in. But apart from that, it's, again, as I said, we currently only have administrators and users, and the users have their resources. So it's the easiest possible way to do management there. It's either it's yours or you don't have access. But as I said, I'm quite sure that we will move forward on that one as well.
That's awesome.
I've seen the question in the questions there,
yes,
Seb. Yep.
You've got a wonderful, first of all, shout out to Pedro Porras for being with us at 2:30 a.m. in Guatemala. That is a legitimate amount of commitment from our community. Here I am at 10:30 p.m. and it's 2:30 a.m. Thank you for joining us. It really means a lot to us, and we would love to answer your question. So, based on your experience managing large container stacks, what do you think is the best way to manage, maintain, and monitor a large number of stacks in Docker? And he sends his regards, for the record.
So for us, we have basically two use cases that we mostly support. We have something that is, I would say, more typical for container usage. That is our microservice-oriented backend. The services that we provide to make all the self-service offering happen. And we're managing that through Docker Compose files, through stacks, and using Docker Swarm, as I said. And that so far has worked well for us. We're right now looking into ways how to implement GitOps to make sure we have a bit more control over the defined state of our backend. But other than that, so far we're quite happy with using Compose files, creating the infrastructure itself using Terraform, but the containers and the services there are done using Compose files. And then the other side, the business applications, that's an unusual container, to put it mildly, because it's kind of the opposite of a stateless microservice. It's a stateful single instance workload. And that means that we always have exactly one container that in and itself is providing all the functionality that a user needs. So as I said, quite an unusual use case, but that's where we are. And that means that we only need to spin up a service, scale it down if you want to stop it, scale it up again if you want to start it, and remove it. So it's very easy for us. It's not a large stack. And that means that we are easily able to just spin them up using the standard Swarm commands. We've created our own API in front of it to make it a bit easier, but actually we're just creating services, stopping and starting them, and that's it.
Are you actually persisting data outside of the cluster using NFS or CIFS, or is the persistent data stored on the node of the cluster?
Yeah, exactly. That's the shared storage story on Azure is a bit weak. Actually, I should have said we didn't run into any issues before. We have one issue that currently breaks the shared storage story on Azure VMs. That's something that's open with Microsoft. That would allow us to move between the nodes. So far, we have implemented something that pins the particular service on the node. So that means as soon as the service spins up, it recognizes which node it is on, and then it pins it to that node. Because as you said, we have the storage on that particular node. We're not using any shared storage so far because it just doesn't work at the moment. And that means that we have the storage on that particular node. That means we have the SQL databases on that particular node, and that helps us with restarting and so on, but we can't move between the nodes at the moment.
We got another very specific question for you, Tobias. This is good. Please keep bringing it on. And Kalyan, I just want to give you a shout out. You've given us quite a few questions, and don't worry, we're going to get to your AWS or GCP conversation as well. But a very specific question for Tobias. I'm running MySQL DB inside a container, and currently I take backup using cron job running in another container, both running in Portainer. Is this the best / correct way to do this, or should I adopt a different way?
I have to say that my MySQL days are a bit older, so I'll answer from a SQL perspective. In SQL, I would do it in the same container, to be honest. I don't see why I would spin up a different container. And I'm wondering if there's anything specific for MySQL that makes you need to do that. But I personally would put it in the same container where the database is running, and then create the backup directly there.
Yeah, the other thing is to do it outside of Docker. If you are using a shared storage system, obviously you can then back up the volume directly outside of it. But yep.
Yeah, of course. But I mean, if you decide to go with the native MySQL stuff, then I would put it in the same container.
Callion, feel free to follow up if you have any further detailed question for MySQL or any of the other features. So shifting back to a question that I think is a little more Neil-centric that Callion also submitted to us. Connecting to AWS or GCP, private registry for Portainer. Talk to us, Neil.
Okay, so GCP is straightforward. Again, Portainer requires that the registry is the Docker API version 2 registry. And as long as it is, then we can connect to it. The Google container registry is, the Amazon ECR is not. So we are unable to connect to the Amazon container registry because they have the Amazon identity and access management in front of it. And so therefore we are unable to use the Docker login command to connect to it. That is something we're working on, and we will be resolving that by embedding a copy of the AWS CLI inside the Portainer container, so that we can then actually issue the AWS CLI login command and then log into the registry on our behalf. So that's something we're working on and we'll be fixing very soon.
Thanks, Neil. We just got another question from Pushdeep. Thank you so much again for always being such a great community participant. Inquiry is, statement is rather, got to manage over 300 stacks. It does become challenging to monitor. If in the future, we can have a way to group certain stacks based on similar tech and functionality, this may help to manage and monitor better. Neil, this might be a question for you. Is this something you're thinking about?
That's kind of a feature request, and that's kind of stacks of stacks. So maybe I hadn't given it much thought, to be fair, but you're right. If you have a large number of stack files, if you recall, we've actually added the ability to have a stopped stack inside Portainer. So you can actually deploy a stack file and have it stopped. So therefore we are a repo of all of your stack files inside the one instance, and you can just start them on demand. But it probably does make sense actually to have some kind of tagging or grouping functionality. So you can say, this is my X application stacks or something else. So that's something I'll take in mind actually. So
a friendly reminder that this is a great opportunity to get your feature requests directly to the CEO of Portainer. If you're listening. Pushdeep extends his gratitude to you, Neil, and truly to our audience as we begin to wind down the pre-stacked questions that we had. This is a really unique opportunity to ask anything of our team, of Tobias, and we welcome all of those questions. Actually, since we're speaking about features, Tobias, anything you wish Portainer would consider in the future as we roll out our product roadmap?
Actually, to be completely honest, not a lot. For what we're using, we are very happy what Portainer is currently having. I mean, if I think longer about it, I might find some things here and there, but at the moment, no, not really something that is immediately needed. We had a couple of things, really details, but yeah, and nothing on a big feature. We need that, or it would help us a lot. Otherwise, I would have let them know before, or maybe even try to create it myself, as it is still an open source core. So yeah, the team would know if I if I had something big that I needed, I would have let them know. Because again, you can just let them know, and that's not specific for me. Just a reminder, also for everyone, they are very open in this discussing that kind of thing. So I think that whenever something come up, I would have no restriction at all in letting them know.
Yeah, we actually plan on publishing our 12-month roadmap in the coming days. It's just going through graphics design at the moment to make it look pretty, but we'll be publishing that, so everyone will know what we're planning to bring into the product in the next 12 months, and that will hopefully be released in the next probably 2 or 3 days, I'd say. So public domain and all.
That's
Look
great.
at that transparency. Foundations of a community first open source product. I absolutely, music to our ears all the time. Tobias, if someone was just getting started with containers, because you're a little bit of a veteran, what would you tell them? I know the complexity is a little bit ominous and intimidating, and I feel like you've managed that intimidation better than most.
Yeah, I think I would, it might be counterintuitive, but I wouldn't go with the big story right now in the market, which is Kubernetes and orchestration and big scale and so on. But really, if you want to get started, just pick a specific workload, give it a try, start small, start your first couple of containers, get them up and running, use them, then start a second, start a third, look into ways to manage multi-container environments, and then maybe look into the orchestration environment. But at least from my point of view, you're hearing a lot of things around those huge scale, very intimidating environments, and there certainly is a big benefit of that. And if you have that specific need, it's good that it's there and that you can understand it and can make it work, or even use one of the managed services. But if you're trying to get started, as the very first container, start Portainer, and then use it to make it very easy to start up your first couple of workloads. Pick whatever web server database you want to use, get it up and running through Portainer. It's very easy. It probably will just work. It usually is that easy, and then spread out from there.
Yeah, I think from my point, it's actually quite important to learn the fundamental differences between a container and a virtual machine. If you skip that learning experience and you jump from nothing into large orchestrated clusters, you are in some big trouble. If you don't understand that containers genuinely are stateless for every single directory unless you specify which ones to persist, and then 3 months later your application restarts and you've lost all your data, that is the end of your career. So you definitely want to spend some time understanding the fundamental differences between virtual machines and containers, and then jump into orchestration. All too often I see people opening issues in support. I'm very new to containers and I've got a question about Kubernetes. What are you doing? Stop. So yeah.
Just maybe to add to that, when I first started, maybe it took a day or two until I believed there is no remote desktop way to log in, because that's just the Windows thing to do. And it just isn't there. It took me a while to accept that reality and understand it. But just to say you're absolutely right. You need to understand those differences. It will save you a lot of time. And then maybe something else that just now came to mind, Elton Stoneman, also a former Docker employee and a Microsoft MVP. So that's a person I'm following quite a bit. And he said on one podcast, Docker is a technology that gets you up and running very quickly, and also gets you back down to earth very quickly, probably phase first. And that is something that I truly think is very true. I mean, it's very easy to get started, but then you need to take some time to understand how it works, and then it can perfectly keep working fine for you as well. But if you don't understand it, you might run into very unexpected issues.
I'm going to borrow that quote. That is awesome.
That was a gem. That was a literal gem. I just want to say, Tobias, one of the things that's been so striking about working with you in the lead up to this is you are incredibly articulate and your metaphors are so on point every time we talk. And I'm incredibly impressed. Two things I want to point out. One, Neil has talked about when it is appropriate and when it is not appropriate to use Kubernetes in the Cisco Cloud podcast. I believe Diane's going to drop that link into the chat to everyone. I encourage you to listen to that. It's a very candid conversation. And I'm also curious, Tobias, as you know, you speak so lovingly and affectionately about our community, which is truly music to our ears. but I'm curious if there's any resources or tools that you have found that we provided or that helped through your discovery and adoption of Portainer that might be particularly relevant to our audience members.
That's actually a good question. I mean, the documentation has gotten a lot better in the last couple of weeks and months. So we've seen a lot more documentation than there was before. I know there was some documentation before, but it was kind of, yeah, you weren't always sure if it's still current. So I think a lot happened there in the last couple of weeks. And if someone has been looking at the documentation before the 2.0 switch, I would ask them to go back and take a look again, because it has gotten a lot better and you can find a lot more information, especially the kind of here's your how to step-by-step walkthrough that you can find a lot of information there. And the other thing is, as I probably said before, jump on the Slack for Portainer, an incredibly open community. You can ask whatever question. The patience in answering the same newbie questions over and over again is truly astonishing to me. I couldn't do it, but feel free, absolutely, if you're a new person coming up, asking all the questions. It can feel kind of stupid. You certainly are not. It's just you're starting on a new technology maybe, and then feel free to answer those questions and there will be friendly answers.
Tobias, we're actually investing really heavily in our documentation, but we also are in our YouTube video content as well. So if anyone out there is just getting started, or you never finished learning, I encourage you to look at our YouTube channel. We produce between 2 to 4 new videos a week, very in-depth videos, and we've got some amazing videos in the pipeline coming up as well. So yeah, I encourage you to look there.
Great. I'm probably in the minority of users. I prefer to read documentation instead of watching videos. It's just my kind of way in skipping forward and watching faster. I struggle a lot watching videos these days. You know, everything is virtual and a video call anyway. So if I can avoid watching videos, I'm actually doing it these days. But I'm certain that this will change in the next couple of months again.
And I see there's a question around Kubernetes containers. So if you want to be a bit more specific on that one, otherwise we can talk in general. But obviously, you know, Portainer supports both Docker Swarm, Docker Swarm, and Kubernetes. And as Tobias said, he's already had a look at it, and you know the experience is very, very similar. So I'm not entirely sure what else we can mention on that one, but yeah, it's obviously, from our perspective, we are focused a lot on deploying a container native application, regardless of the orchestrator that it is running upon. So as long as you know how you want your application to deploy and answer the questions in Portainer related to your application, we'll take care of deploying it for you on either Docker or Kubernetes. So.
Yeah, I think the question is also coming from a Business Central perspective, which is the ERP system that we're working with, and there are some challenges because, as I said, it's a stateful single instance workload, and that, I mean, it's just not the idea of Kubernetes to run something like that. It is supported and you can do it. It's just you're not using a lot of the benefits of Kubernetes if you're doing that way. So yeah, it's possible. We might end up doing it sooner or later as well. It's just, it's not a natural fit. Let's put it that way.
And I see there's a question just coming now, which is probably one for me actually, but I have Portainer
that looks like
running.
A Neil question. Yes.
Yeah, I have Portainer running in one EC2 of Amazon, and I have another one running in GCP. The GCP has a public IP. How to prevent unauthorized access? Easy. Do not expose the Docker daemon publicly. If you have to expose it so that they can form a cluster together of nodes, then absolutely use access control lists. You do not want your Docker internal daemon or the swarm ports or anything like that exposed to the public internet. So make sure you set up a firewall access control list and only allow access to the node from the Amazon instance and vice versa. Exposing your Docker environment publicly is asking to be Bitcoin mined.
What an apt analogy right now. Like really just so timely.
It's true though. It's true.
No, it is. No, it is. I mean, it's literal and quite apt if we're being frank. Also, Bozidar, I'm sure I'm butchering your name and I apologize for that, but it looks like you're Croatian. So hello to it, or somewhere in Eastern Europe. I recognize those accents, and I welcome all of our friends in Europe. That was a big part of the point of this. Okay, so let's shift it a little bit different to Tobias as we're coming into the last 10 minutes, and I'm gonna put this up here to our audience members. This is your last golden opportunity to ask questions, and as you know, we reward the bold with swag at Portainer. So if you are considering jumping online, even briefly, just a little bit to show us your face and ask a question, we can send you a Portainer t-shirt. If you want to hang out in the chat, we totally understand. It's a very different time zone across the world for a lot of people, not a big deal. But Tobias, something that I've really taken from our time together, which I'm very grateful for, is you strike me as someone who's a very good mentor and a very good leader and a very good manager. So if I was a young dev or someone getting really curious about the space right now, what would your advice be to someone as they look to build their skill set into the future? What would you teach someone who is curious about being a part of what we kind of like to dub as the container revolution, or the future of containers, as they look forward and think about building out their skill set?
Yeah, I think as we already briefly touched upon, it's very important to understand the fundamentals, not jump headfirst into the most complex topic that you can find, but really start up from the fundamentals. Make sure you understand how the core functionality actually is designed, how it works, and get your hands on. I mean, that's for me personally, but also an advice that I always give. Don't just read the blog or look at the video, but give it a try for yourself. Fortunately, in the container space, almost everything is free, almost everything is open source, so you can just give it a try and use it. There are great learning paths from the different big vendors out there for learning containerization. And there are also tools like Portainer that can help you with it. But really, my advice would be try to understand how it works. And then as soon as possible, move from doing it yourself to using the tools, using the abstraction levels that are there. So try to understand how creating a container, how creating container image works, but then go up and use Portainer, for example, to actually use it. Because if you have the knowledge, then you don't run the risk of running into any issues because you didn't understand it. But at the same time, you don't need to do everything for yourself, but just use the tools, use the abstractions that are there, because they help you to make your life easier. But if you don't understand what the abstraction actually is doing, you still might run into issues.
I like that. I just want to echo, just chiming in on my own question, something that we learned from David, who is with us in our last community chat, is sometimes you got to break things to learn how to fix them. And I heard a lot of that exploratory tone in what you've told us today as well. Neil, is there any other question that you oh, we've got a raised hand. Let's bring him on. I had a feeling Kalon was going to join us. I knew it just took a matter of time. Please welcome. We welcome you to the stage. We embrace your questions. Thank you so much for all of your questions in general. And woo, here we go. You're fabulous.
Hello guys, hi.
How you going?
Well, it's a COVID area, so we need to wear this every time.
It's good.
It's
You're
true, yeah, yeah. It's true. We have to. Even the government is restricting us that we need to wear this anyhow. Even we are in office with just few of the workers working, still we need to wear it. So I want to just share one of my experiences. Just a few days ago, one of my clients who was running a very old application in PHP 5.3. And initially, almost we had hosted our things in few of the shared hosting. Like 10 of my clients were using the same application. And then got a mail from the hosting provider that we are depreciating that 5.3 PHP, and we will be only be using 7.3. The most important thing that the code which we have done, it was quite old and we cannot do a scratch from that at this current point of time. So it was really a headache. And I, as a my core technologies are as a developer. So I'm not a DevOps guy, but I know a bit of Docker. So Portainer helped me a lot to migrate those code in a very specific PHP 5.4 version of container. And it saved my day a lot. Like from the two 3 days we were struggling that how to make that project live. It is something a courier system where they were using their complete, like the full management from 10 different locations in India. And we had to go live because they were very much impacting the business. So Portainer really helped me in doing this work a lot. Thanks guys for the Portainer.
It's actually quite interesting. Everyone thinks that with Docker, you have to use the most modern applications, cloud native designed applications. In fact, there are actually a lot of benefits if you have an old application, because it does actually safely encapsulate the application in a container. I hate using the word container to describe what it does, but it actually puts it in a bubble. It is completely isolated. So if you have older applications on older versions of PHP or older versions of .NET or any of these languages, it's actually very safe to put them in a container inside Docker. It just completely protects it from any other hostilities. So yeah, there's actually a really good use case to basically modernize or protect older legacy applications.
Yeah,
the application was approximate. Yeah, the application was approximate like 8 to 9 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it really helped, and we cannot move it to the new infrastructure at all. It was a kind of monolith application.
If you want to know something funny, I actually worked with somebody who migrated an application from Windows NT4 into a Docker container, and I kid you not, it is running to this day inside a Docker container on Windows, an old NT4 application. So and they simply could not move away from it. It was a SCADA based application, so they could not move away, and moved it into Docker as a way to modernize it. All right.
Thank you so much for all of your thoughts, Kilon. And Christian, I see that you're dipping. So nice to have you with us, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. We're here every month, folks. We try different time zones to try and figure out how to straddle this global community and make it inclusive and exciting and exhilarating for everyone. We welcome all of your questions from around the globe, and I know I speak for all of us when I say it's a total joy to see how Portainer has been adopted, not only just literally, but how globally it's been adopted. Kalyan, is there anything else you wanted to ask? You sort of have the floor, and I know Diane's gonna hook you up with some swag, but I'm curious if you have unadulterated access before we shut it down. Oh, no, all right, we're good. Okay, on that note, I just want to give everyone one last quick second to throw anything in the comments if you want to engage. Now that you've seen how easy it is to join the group, you could throw in a last buzzer beater question to get in on the swag.
Actually, there is a question here. Some old Flash web-based applications. Any thoughts on how I can use Portainer Docker for this? Ooh.
There you go, Neil. You want to talk about Flash? There you go.
No, I don't.
Sure? You sure you don't want to talk about Flash? I don't even want to talk about Flash, and I'm a non-technical.
I'm not sure whether Flash runs inside Windows Server Core containers. It's actually an interactive protocol or an interactive engine. So I'm not entirely sure. Anything that requires Explorer.exe does not work inside a container. So Tobias, have you ever played with Flash inside a container?
Actually, a long time ago, but I would be more worried about the client side, because as far as I've seen, most of the current browsers are dropping support. So that also, I mean, the backend side I could more or less see, but the client side would be very interesting.
Yeah, the client side, as long as you're using an old version of the browser, it's probably okay. So, but yeah, the back end would be intriguing. I can't say I've ever tried. But yeah, technically, if it runs in Windows, there's no reason why it wouldn't work. You could just get the IIS container image and try it out.
Yeah, it's more or less packaged, so you should be able to just plug it in.
Mm.
I see there's a little bit of commentary here, which is great on this. I understand the legacy of Flash. It's a challenge even for marketers, for the record. So I admire what you're doing, Push Deep, and especially in the education space. Hopefully things get a little easier. Rikus, thank you so much for joining us. We're glad you could be here. On that note, unless there are any other questions, I want to open the floor to Tobias, who is so nice to give us not only this hour of his time, but a few hours to prepare for this and to share his wonderful insights, as well as our extended gratitude for being a community ambassador. If you are interested in getting involved in our community, Diane will gladly drop those links right now. And if you can't tell, one of the very unique things about Portainer, and I can say this as someone who's a bit external, is to really feel like family day one. Everyone cares about you here, and we welcome you. So don't be shy. Neil is more available than most executives I've ever encountered, and we are all very happy to answer your questions. So Tobias, if people are interested in learning more about you, which quite frankly, I can't imagine how they aren't after this session, how do they find you? How do they come work for you? What's the scoop?
Working for me is actually interesting. Thanks for bringing that up. We're looking for people all around the globe in maybe a bit of a niche technology, but if you're interested in moving there, then of course, please go to cosmoconsult.com. You will, depending on where you are, you might find one of our companies close to you. So feel free to let us know, because we're looking for a lot of people right now. And for me specifically, there's tobiasfenster.io, which is my blog. There you can find most of the things that I'm doing. Also my Twitter handle, LinkedIn contact, and so on. So I'm always happy to get in touch if you want to have a discussion around containers, around Portainer, but also on Windows containers. Just ping me and let me know. I'm always happy to have a discussion around those topics.
It is such a gift to have this level of technical talent available to y'all. Just gonna throw that out there. Also, while you're at it, know that you can always reach out to the Portainer team. We're all here. We're actually hiring as well. So if anyone here is looking for a job, we've got a lot of opportunities between these two companies, depending on your preference and your geography. Di, Neil, Tobias, thank you so much for facilitating this dialogue with our community. It's one of our favorite moments every month to get to share this time with you. And we hope that if you're watching this recording in retrospect, that you let us know perhaps what time zone would make it more accessible to you. And also do realize that every question you ask gets asked to the panelists. We don't actually filter a lot of that out. So we make sure, based on your inquiries and based on the topic, that we have the right people here. Tobias is a wonderful example of that. Such a wealth of information. If you're not convinced to go apply to work for him yet, I hope you look into COSMO Consult and find yourself a wonderful new boss. And if you're considering using us for your container management, you find it as easy as he has. Any closing words from the squad? Nope, looks great. All right, friends. Well, thank you so much to everyone who joined us tonight. It's a joy and a gift to have your time. We hope to see you on all of our social channels and in our community. And if you have a community member or a specific feature or a use case that you're really curious about, we produce these shows for you. So do let us know what it is that you're keen to learn more about. And we look forward to seeing you next month. Thanks so much, Tobias.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having me. This was great fun. Thanks.
Thanks, Tobias.